Welcome to another episode of the Property Management Show, brought to you by 4.5, a marketing agency that creates and implements owner lead generating plans for property managers. Visit 4andhalf.com to learn more. That's FOURANDHALF.com.
Today we're going to talk about the newly minted Women's Leadership Council and their event next week. Elevate your game and take the fear out of public speaking.
Our first guest is Kelly Tollefson, who's the NARPM 2020 president and also the owner of T-Square Properties in Seattle. Since the start of the pandemic, she has completed 18 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzles. That's a total of 18,000 individual pieces. This is her secret to staying grounded and sane during this crazy year.
Also joining us today is Chrissy Wade. She's a super wife, a super mom. She owns and runs Wellspring Property Management in Southern California and a real estate business. She is a self-proclaimed CrossFit junkie, and her favorite thing to eat is tacos al pastor, which who can blame her? What's not to love about tacos al pastor?
Exactly, Brittany. Now let's play the interview so I can go get some tacos.
Thank you both for joining us. It's been a pleasure getting to know you the last week. I mean, we talked to you earlier this week to kind of discuss a little bit so Marie and I could learn a little bit more about this Women's Leadership Council that you've been developing over the last few months. We understand that it's still very new and you're still kind of working out the kinks, but your first event is coming up, which is congratulations, very exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to set this up?
Yeah, I can take that, ladies, if you want. If you have ever been on any of the Facebook groups, which I'm sure the vast majority of you guys have, you will have seen anytime there's an event, or maybe just in general, a lot of the feedback is women generally don't feel represented in those events. So I put out there in one of the groups, hey, what if I were to put on a women's event, for women, by women? And the response was incredible. But what kind of blew it out of the water for me was the private messages that I kept on getting. A ton of ladies were coming in and just asking, hey, I would love to be a part of it. I would love to be a speaker. So I would ask questions back. Okay, well, have you ever done this? Can you send me over like a portfolio or some samples of your, events that you've spoken at? And they didn't really have any. So, then other people reached out to me, like Brad Larson reached out and said, hey, I'd love to help you get this thing going and I can introduce you to NARPM. So that's kind of the nutshell of where it started. We really don't want to put a woman on center stage if she's never had that experience. We want her to be successful in whatever she does, and we want the audience to get the most out of it. So this is where our little nest egg is starting. We're wanting to grow more women to be on center stage.
I love it. So what it sounds like is instead of just throwing them into the ocean and like hope they learn how to swim, you're like, hey, I recognize that you are interested, and it seems like you may need to kind of like develop more skills to be able to, swim once you're thrown into the ocean. And that's kind of what you're doing with this first event, right?
Right, exactly.
That's great.
The other thing too, that when Chrissy came to NARPM to talk about this, we kind of looked at it and said, this could be a great opportunity to develop more property management women leaders. And so we thought this, while a lot of women see speaking as a barrier to leadership, or that it's not just, the public speaking like people think, it's about taking the fear out of just speaking up even in smaller groups. And we can go into a little more detail about what the event's going to be like if you want, maybe a little later.
Yeah, I love that. And so you mentioned a couple of things in your previous statement. So something about how it's more than just like gaining kind of the skills to speak on stage, but also kind of like gaining the skills to speak up. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Sure. For our first event, what we're doing is we're introducing a woman speaker who this is her business, is she develops speakers and helps them build their business as public speakers. Her name is Michelle Major, and her company is the Rebel Speaker. And she's going to be talking about removing the barriers that women feel to have their voices heard, whether it be in the boardroom or in a small group meeting, maybe even just in a personal relationship, of how we can fortify ourselves to speak up when we need our voices, and also not to talk ourselves out of the fact that we do have something to say. And then preparing to speak, some practical tips on what anyone can do, not just women, but what anyone can do when they're preparing to speak at any time when they are in a position to bring something up. So, you know, for example, speaking in front of 100 people at one of the NARPM events, you know, what are some of those tips you can do to be prepared and be confident in who you are and what you have to say?
Absolutely. And that kind of reminds me of something we were talking about the other day, how just historically women haven't really been encouraged to speak up, and not it's not always like, oh, don't speak. It's more of, you know, the idea that women are supposed to be soft spoken and, you know, supportive and nurturing, that it kind of can be an obstacle when you do want to be a leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't have that confidence, and it starts with knowing that you have something to say, how to say it in a way that other people are receptive to it, whatever the message may be, and how to comprise that message into something that you know, kind of gives you your cohesive thoughts in a way.
And probably trusting yourself too, trusting that you do have something to say. What you have to say is valuable. You're smart. And not to say that, you know, women don't believe that, but I think it's just giving people the confidence to trust in themselves too is really valuable.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us that have been in a leadership, sorry, Christy,
it's okay.
Who've been in leadership positions, being confident in your thoughts and your ideas is probably one of the first steps in taking that initiative to get to a leadership role and to pursue leadership positions.
And I just wanted to jump on there about the communication aspect. You know, I was a stay-at-home with our littles. We have 5 kids. I was a stay-at-home with our littles for a long time. So my communication style changed from communicating with adults all the time to breaking down things so my littles could understand that. So that was my communication set then. So I've had to learn how to communicate with adults again, right? And I think that's the story for a lot of stay-at-home moms and maybe even stay-at-home dads at this point. You know, we're entering, you know, my youngest is 16. So now I'm entering a different phase of my life where I need to, you know, speak a little more adult-ish, we'll call it, right? And learning those skills is not something that I can't learn. It's just something I put on the back burner because I was doing something else in a separate part of my life. And that's okay. That's fine. And we just want to give a chance for those women and men and whoever else wants to join the ability to learn those skills again, or maybe sharpen the skills that they already have.
Yeah. Are there any other than you know, the confidence piece and, you know, giving people the tools to speak publicly, are there any other goals that you want to accomplish with this event specifically?
Well, I think, we're doing a panel at the end. So Michelle will be moderating a panel it'll be Chrissy, myself, Liz Clayman, Brian Birdie, and Brad Larson. And we included both genders on the panel on purpose because we wanted to give the listener, the attendee, the opportunity to see that there are different ways to approach public speaking, male or female. We didn't want to necessarily highlight one over the other, but that we wanted this to be a participative event for everyone. And this just seemed to be the right venue to do it. So I think that overcoming public speaking can be really, really difficult, or just hearing your own voice inside your head. How do you compile those thoughts? And so for this event, that's what we want to do. And just having, I think in answer to your question, Brittany, it's more like this can be you or anyone. We want it to apply to anyone that has thought about this. Again, whether it's to pursue your career goals or maybe your personal goals, professional, you know, direction of where you want to take yourself. And this seems
Yeah.
to be a very broad spectrum of topic that's popular. People really don't always approach it in the way that maybe some people that have been speaking for a while did. And
Yeah.
cool.
That's awesome. So it's really just the main goal is to empower people
Exactly.
into feeling like they can do something that they couldn't do before.
That's exactly what I should have just said 5 minutes ago before going on and on. Like
Oh
I
no,
said.
what you said was perfect. It was
Yeah,
great.
it's empowerment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's empowerment. Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Right.
And I think they're going to walk away with some practical tools on practicing those things to make their communication styles better.
Amazing. And so I do want to note, since we're kind of on the topic of the composition of the panel. So although your current like working name for the organization is called Women's Leadership Council, you are absolutely not a women only organization. Can you speak more about that?
Sure. We believe in the council that's already been forming this believe that every voice matters, right? Man, woman, whoever identifies anywhere in between, your voice matters. Which is why we want to incorporate men into the panel. We can learn a lot from men. Men can learn a lot from us. And together we can elevate the property management industry. We can elevate our families. We can elevate each other. That is kind of one of the overarching goals of this is let's just make each other better, right? Let's learn from each other. How can I help my husband be a better husband? How can he help me be a better wife? How can we help each other be better businessmen and women? So that's one of the reasons why we just want to be so mindful to incorporate anybody who wants to be a part of it. Even if it says Women's Leadership Council, everybody is welcome.
Yeah, and it's a working title, right? And I understand the organization is its in early stages, right? You and a group of your friends kind of put it together really quickly because you felt like we just need to get this in front of people as fast as
Get it going.
possible. Yeah,
Yes.
just get it going. And this is like not its final form, right? This is just the beginning of something. Who crossing fingers, it will be bigger and greater.
It is. And we have, the question is why Women's Leadership Council? And I would like Kelly to explain why, because there is a leadership university through NARPM. So that's why we kind of tag the women onto it to kind of differentiate ourselves.
Thanks, Chrissy. And I think part of it had to do with when you came to Gail, our CEO and executive director of NARPM, you came with the idea of something that the executive committee and the board of directors has been thinking about for a long time, is that there's a lot of women property managers, there's a lot of women members of NARPM, but we're not always seeing them stepping up at leadership roles. And so we thought, in talking with you and kind of building this framework, is that let's put together a group focusing on women's challenges and women's issues and women's concerns in the workplace. And let's see where we can come away with that. So in December of this year, we will be, or I should say this concept will be brought to the board of directors as a new committee for NARPM. And so it'll be a women's leadership council is what we've come up with just kind of at the beginning, and that may stick, it may not. And then Marie, to your point, yeah, NARPM just started. We've been doing for 4 or 5 years now, or maybe even longer, chapter leadership training. And that's been a 2-day event where we bring all the chapter leaders, the president and the president-elects, into a location. Back pre-COVID, we would do it live. And we would spend a couple of days on how to lead a chapter and those kinds of leadership skills. So what, as a board and in strategic planning, what we've talked about is how can we develop leaders just within the organization, within NARPM as a whole, and what can we offer for them, not just within the box of chapter leadership. And so we've developed a leadership series. And Chrissy mentioned the Leadership University. That is my personal idea, not my personal idea, but a vision that I've had and with a lot of other people within NARPM, is to eventually create a NARPM Leadership University. And these are just the baby steps, the leadership series that we just started, or symposium. That's a 9-month series that just started last week. People that want to develop their own leadership skills, just for the sake of being a leader. And so there are 2 completely separate entities that have 2 different focuses and will, have 2 different missions and visions as far as their achievement and the purpose of each group. So, we see this women's council we're starting with the public speaking, but there's so many other things that women deal with in the workforce that men don't necessarily, they're not presented with. And so we'll be working on coming together and developing, we're looking at quarterly, starting next year, events that is sponsored by the Women's Leadership Council.
Can you, going back to the, maybe the obstacles you've encountered in your experience within the industry due to gender, maybe, or things like that, is there anything that you can speak to about your experiences?
Chrissy, do you want to take that one?
I'll just, from a practical experience, I was managing a commercial building, and they decided to fire me because they felt a man could do it better when I was doing everything I was asked to do. I've come across those kinds of things a couple of times, and it kind of took me back because I'd never experienced that before. And all I can do, and since then all I could think about it was, how can I overcome this the next time, right?
Yeah.
Questions, better interview questions for our clients. Looking back, there was writing on the wall that I should have paid attention to. So what's the solution to a problem is what we want to kind of find, right? How can I have a solution to that problem, that gender kind of bias, and not alienate anybody in the meantime?
And I think too, that's a good point, is we don't want to alienate anyone, but I think women, and we talked about this in our pre-meeting, about the different labels that women have based on the same behaviors they exhibit that men exhibit. And so if we're being forceful in a conversation, we're considered aggressive instead of assertive. It may be one example. Or we, our expected behaviors in a work environment may be different because of our gender. And how do we even that playing field, and how are we treated equally, even if our behaviors might be the same, but we're given different labels. And there's different levels of respect based on those behaviors. And I think we're just looking for an environment where we can learn how to, I don't want to say combat, but how to approach those different scenarios that we may come across. What's the best way for us to communicate that's not appropriate, or however we might deal with it, and it's about educating everyone that's listening and everyone that's participating.
Right. To be sensitive to those. And I don't know if sensitive is the right word, but to those types
of those. Yeah.
Yes. Cognizant is better than sensitive. And, what you just said also reminds me of what you were saying earlier. So if you speak up, that might be deemed aggressive instead of assertive. That goes back to like the little voice in your head. So if you're thinking about it that way, that means you're less likely to even have somebody make that judgment about you because you're too worried about what people might think about you. I know I've experienced that before where I haven't wanted to say things. I've changed a lot since then. But
well, and you think about that, how many times do you think, and this may be stereotypical, and we're here to learn about each other. That's what this group is all about. Men don't sit around and think, oh, they're going to think I'm aggressive if I say that, or they're going to think I'm a B word if I say that.
Yeah.
They just don't. They don't ask themselves those questions.
And they probably, well, not to generalize,
right. Yeah.
They may, some different types of people may not think about it later on too. I know sometimes if I speak up and I kind of think about it later, oh, should I have said that?
Yeah.
It's not just about saying it in the moment. It's about the emotional pressure that's on you later on too, I feel like.
Yeah,
right.
6 years later, was I really being difficult? No, I was just, speaking my mind, speaking my thoughts, and yeah, women, I'll speak for myself, 6 years later, I'm like, I should have said this instead of this, when that time has passed. But I think that's very important for our counterparts in business to understand about us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to understand that just me speaking my mind and speaking my heart and disagreeing is not being difficult. I want to have a conversation with you. I don't mind bantering back and forth with you, just like you do with a colleague of the same gender. We're fine with that, but don't put the label on me before.
Yeah,
absolutely. So just to take this to another, and we didn't talk about this the other day, but last week we had the National NARPM convention.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an emotional person. I wear my heart on my sleeve. And it's been something I've had to adjust. Just being in the business world and owning my own business is, I have to think of myself as the referee, and the middle neutral person. But when I was doing my final convention talk, speech, whatever, over Zoom, I got really emotional, and I remember thinking to myself while I was having these emotions, and I was giving away awards for Volunteer of the Year, people that have really made a difference and an impact, not only on me personally in a positive way, but on the industry and in NARPM. And I was super emotional, and I kept thinking, I shouldn't cry. I shouldn't be upset. I shouldn't be crying. Why am I couldn't get it together. And I thought, later on, I wonder if a man would feel that way. I don't know. And I know there's a lot of women that would not get emotional. It just felt almost embarrassing to a point. I mean, I wasn't
to have feelings.
Exactly. To have feelings in a professional environment, right? And to exhibit those feelings, and not in a controlled way. And I just thought, and afterwards I thought, I wonder if a man would think that. And at first I said they probably wouldn't cry, but I cried. So.
I really love, you being vulnerable and sharing that, because I think it's very true. All the stories that you all shared today, it just underlines the fact that, you know, it is true. I think a lot of people misunderstand, and they miss the fact that, like, there are certain groups of people in any business, any industry, that just do not inherently feel as like included or as safe in all spaces in the business compared to, for example, men. Like for the property management industry, right? Like, I know, Kelly, previously you shared about how sometimes you deal with clients who don't take your word as the final word, and they would prefer to speak to your husband because they feel like that's more final. And it doesn't make sense, because you and your husband are equals in your company, yet there are certain owners that don't see it the same way. And it's like, it's just interesting. That's just how society works. And I think instead of ignoring that is a fact, I think it's important what you guys are doing. You're trying to put out something to try to, like, bring the playing field a little bit more level every little step we can.
And it's a slow process, right? I mean, change isn't going to happen tomorrow. Just because we want something to change today doesn't mean it's going to be different tomorrow. It takes steps, it takes education, it takes, work on both people's part to make something change. And we're hoping this is, just one step of a bunch to come that will help level that field a little bit.
That's great. And in the spirit of, transparency and inclusivity, can you speak to where the organization is currently in terms of, like, diverse and inclusive representation? For example, men of color, perhaps other people who identify in other genders, and how would you like to grow this organization's diversity and inclusivity in the long term?
Yeah, sure. So right now, everybody is one single color. That's not by design. It's just by, like you said previously, we had this idea and we got people who we knew could jump on board really fast and throw something together really quickly. So it's kind of a traditional, couple men, couple women, all similar to looking to me. I'm a white lady. But that's not necessarily where we want it to be in the future. Like I said a little bit ago, every voice matters, every person matters. So of course you want to incorporate more people of color, people who identify, man, woman, anywhere in between. We want to include that. It's just for this first little venture, we weren't able to reach out and get as much involvement as we wanted. We threw it together just in a matter of weeks. Our next event, we'll have some more time to plan and get it together, and we're hoping to demonstrate our desire to have more people of different thoughts and mindsets represented.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I would even, anybody listening or to people that end up attending, spread the word. So, because it really seems like this is going, what if it ends up being called Women's Leadership Council long term, I think that's great. But for people that might not feel like their voice is involved there, I would say contact you guys to see how they could be represented and make it more
and diverse.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know what the word I was looking for. I was going to say broad, but that's probably not what I want to say either. But I think just, uh, just getting in touch and coming up with ideas and reaching out to you, I think that would be great too.
And we're really just asking the listeners and the watchers and whoever is a part of this podcast to really understand where our heart is coming from. Our heart is to change things. And sometimes we just have to start at one space and work little by little to change it. So our heart is really coming from a place of change. And this is just where we're starting. And, the sky's the limit is to where it's going to go.
You're coming from your experiences. So if other people from, different walks of life, different genders, different race, whatever, can come and bring thoughts from their own experiences, that would just help it further.
Exactly.
And that's exactly why you asked to be on our podcast, because you wanted to reach that wider audience that your personal network may not have had. And so to all our listeners, again, the call to action here is to, share your experiences, try to get involved as much as you can. If you've ever felt like your voice didn't matter, if you've ever felt like there was this voice in your head that was telling you, you can't say that, or like, oh, should I have said that? Like, contact this council and try to learn how to improve this so that it can reach more people. And so with that, can you tell us more about the event again that you're coming up?
Absolutely. I'll let Kelly start off. She knows our main speaker, so she can.
So yeah, like I mentioned, Michelle Mazur is our keynote speaker, and she'll be talking about communication, about speaking up and speaking in public, and some of the barriers that you might feel when you have that opportunity, and how to overcome them, along with the tools to set up a talk. And if you're going to be doing a keynote or a session in front of people. And then Liz Clayman and Brian Birdie will be doing two. So Michelle will speak, and then we'll have some Q&A. And by the way, this event is November 12th, and it will be 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time, for about 2.5 hours. And it's free to NARPM members, which is the National Association of Residential Property Managers, free to them, and $25 for others. And then I think you're going to post a link to register in the show notes, correct?
Yes, we will.
Okay, great. Or you can go to narpm.org, and the conferences, and you'll see the Women's Leadership Council there. So then Liz Clayman, who will be she's a Southwest Regional Vice President right now. Next year, she will be our president-elect, so she'll be the National Association of Residential Property Managers president in 2022. And then Brian Birdie is a former national NARPM president, and each of them will have about 40 minutes to speak with some Q&A. Then we'll go on to the panel, and then Michelle will be moderating the panel for the 5 of us that I mentioned earlier, which is Liz, Brian, Brad Larson, myself, and Chrissy.
And we want to mention there are scholarships for that $25. If somebody wants to come and they can't afford it or whatever, we do have a lot of scholarships available for those people.
That's awesome. I'm really excited to see where this goes. Thank you so much. I can't speak right now. Thank you both so much. I only had 1 cup of coffee today. I really should have had the second one. Thank you both so much for joining us, because this is just, it's new and exciting, and I can't wait to see where it goes. So thank you, listeners, for joining. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to Chrissy or Kelly, and they will say hello to you.